Hey guys, welcome to Animation Recap Center. Today we will recap the story of an amazing mystery thriller film called Mystic River. So, without any further ado, let's start with the recap. The movie begins along the neighborhood streets of Boston, where three childhood friends, Jimmy, Sean, and Dave, are playing. Jimmy tells the two to write their name on the wet cement of the sidewalk. Jimmy initiates by writing his name, and the two follow. But when Dave is writing his name, a creepy man who pretends to be a cop stops him. The creepy man reprimands them and asks where they live. Upon learning that Dave does not live nearby, the creepy man forces Dave to enter the car. In fear, Dave goes inside the car, thinking that the creepy man is a cop. Inside, a priest smiles at Dave. After that, the creepy man and the priest drive away with Dave, while the confused Jimmy and Sean watch them take away their helpless friend. Apparently, the creepy man and the priest lock Dave in the cellar, possibly molesting him for days. After 4 days of traumatic experience, Dave escapes from his abductors and is able to come home. 25 years later, Jimmy, Sean, and Dave are already adults who live their own lives, so they are not that close anymore. Dave already has formed a family of a son and a wife. Dave is a blue-collar worker continually haunted by the abduction and rape. Apparently, Dave still suffers from his childhood trauma, which affects his mental stability. Meanwhile, Jimmy becomes a thug and soon changes his life for his daughter, Katie, who came from his dead first wife. Now, he is married to his second wife and they have 2 young daughters. On the other side, Sean becomes a detective and is also married. He always receives calls from his wife, who currently lives with their baby far away from him. Weirdly enough, she is completely silent during those calls. One Saturday, Katie informs her father that she is going out with her friends later at night. Jimmy then allows her. As Katie is about to leave, she gives Jimmy a look and says she will see him later. Outside, Katie rides her car when her secret boyfriend, called Kid, surprises her. After they tongue massage each other, Kid asks her if they will continue their plans for tomorrow. She affirms. That night, Katie and her friends come to the bar where they enjoy drinking and dancing around. Meanwhile, Dave, who happens to be drinking in the bar, recognizes Katie. Midnight comes. Dave goes home at 3 a.m. full of blood, with a stomach wound and injured hands. The wife asks him to go to the hospital, but he refuses to do so. He explains to her that his injuries came from a mugger who tried to attack him. He appears to be terrified, thinking that he might have killed the mugger. But the following day, Dave's wife checks the newspaper and she does not find news about the dead mugger. Suddenly, the 911 receives a report from a boy that there is a car full of blood along the streets. They ask the name of the boy, but he refuses to reveal it. Meanwhile, Katie is still not coming home. Upon knowing this, Jimmy comes to the store and calls her friend's dad. But the dad says she is not there since she left her friends at 1 a.m. last midnight. Later, Kid comes to the store with his brother and looks for Katie. So, Jimmy, who appears to hate Kid and his mute brother, coldly says that she is going to her sister's communion. After that, Jimmy and his wife attend the communion of his other daughter. Meanwhile, Detective Sean and his partner come to investigate the bloody car. It turns out that the car is Katie's car, but Katie is nowhere to be found. Based on his observation, Sean speculates that the suspect shot her in the shoulder and then she runs to the grass field. So, they search Katie there and soon find her dead body. In the church, Jimmy, who is worried about his daughter, notices police cars passing through the streets. He then follows them until he reaches the crime scene. Upon seeing Katie's car there, Jimmy becomes extremely worried. He asks Sean if Katie is already dead. At this moment, his extreme anger and sadness come out as Sean cannot answer his question, confirming that Katie is already dead. After that, Jimmy comes to the police station to confirm if the dead body is Katie. After confirming it, Sean and his partner ask Jimmy for details which might help to solve the case. Jimmy then says that everything was usual yesterday, except Katie giving him a look, implying she will never see him again. The partner takes note of it, and also takes note of Jimmy being in prison 16 years ago for robbery. The following day, people come to visit Jimmy's family at their home to mourn with them. Dave and his wife are also there. The wife keeps giving Dave a worried look. It seems that she thinks Dave is responsible for Katie's death since he coincidentally comes home full of blood last night, exactly when Katie was murdered. After that, the detective asks the old woman who lives near the crime if she witnessed something last night. The old woman says she heard a woman's voice saying hi last night and then a gunshot. The partner then speculates Katie knows the murderer. To gather information, the detectives ask Katie's friend about their goodbye party last night and the Vegas pamphlets. The friends then admit that Katie plans to leave with her secret boyfriend that day to have a new life in Vegas. This leads the detectives to Kid. Later, Jimmy visits Dave at his home. He notices Dave's injured, so he asks Dave about it. Dave replies he got it accidentally from the door. Jimmy then expresses his extreme sadness from Katie's sudden death. He feels that he should not cry because he is a man, but at this point, he starts to sob. Meanwhile, the detectives interrogate Kid and their plan to go to Vegas. Upon learning that Katie is already dead, Kid gets emotional and confirms that they are planning to go to Vegas on Sunday. As the last question, the detective asks Kid where he was during the time Katie gets murdered. He says that he is asleep. The detectives then ask Kid to take a polygraph test with them. He agrees. That night, Sean receives a call from his wife, but she still refuses to speak. He then shares that he is tired of his work sending murderers to jail, but the victims remain dead after that. The following day, the detectives receive the result of Kid's polygraph test, and he perfects it. So, the detectives search for another lead by looking at the people who are in the bar on Saturday night. They find Dave's name, so they visit him to ask questions. The detectives take notice of his hand injuries. They then ask him if he notices anything unusual in the bar. Dave says there's nothing strange in the bar that night. As the last question, the detectives ask Dave where he was during the time of Katie's death. In response, Dave lied, saying he came home at 1 a.m. After that, the detectives talk about the case. The partner then suggests that they take a look at Dave, because Katie knows him. He was in the bar that night, and also, Dave has hand injuries. Meanwhile, Jimmy promises to his dead daughter that he will find the murderer before the police, so that he can kill the murderer. The following day, the detectives come to Jimmy's house, where they encounter Dave. The partner asks Dave where his wounds came from. Dave replies it came from a garbage disposal, but the partner is not convinced. After that, Sean secretly asks Dave's wife what time Dave came home on Saturday night, but she lies to him, saying she is asleep that night, so she does not know. The wife then immediately walks away, looking agitated. To continue their investigation, the detectives ask Jimmy why he hates Kid. In response, Jimmy shares that he hates Kid's father, called just Ray, for leaving his family, so he thinks that Kid would be the same as his father. After that, the detectives head back to the headquarters, where the ballistic report finally arrives. The report indicates that the gun used to murder Katie was also used to rob a liquor store years ago, but no one was arrested for the crime. So, the detectives ask the liquor store owner about the robbery. The store owner shares to them that he thinks his former employee, Just Ray, was responsible for the robbery. This implies Kid's father, Just Ray, owned the gun used to murder Katie. After that, the detectives have an argument as Sean calls back their investigation to Kid, but his partner insists that Dave remains the suspect, since guns are easy to pass around, so Dave possibly got it. Late at night, Dave is watching a vampire movie when his wife arrives. He asks her where she comes from. She then vaguely replies that she just thinks about things alone. Suddenly, Dave angrily confronts her. He asks her if she thinks that he killed Katie. She then asks Dave why he just cannot tell the police about the murder so he can clear his name from Katie's death. Dave suddenly outbursts and starts sobbing as he shares his childhood traumatic experience with his wife. He then says that his real self died when his abductor molested him, and he is now like a vampire who walks undead. After that, he says that he cannot trust his mind anymore and proceeds outside to take a walk. Meanwhile, the wife is completely terrified and confused upon witnessing Dave's behavior. As Dave takes a walk outside, he encounters Jimmy. He then admits to Jimmy that he saw Katie in the bar before her death. The next day, the partner shares with Sean that he found blood on Dave's car upon inspecting it. He found type B blood, same with Dave's blood type on the seat, and type O blood, same with Katie's blood type in the trunk. They then interrogate Dave, but they don't get anything from him. It turns out that Dave's car was not in his possession last night, and was apparently reported missing. Sean then insists to his partner that they should focus on Just Ray's gun, leaving the partner no choice but to let Dave go. They then take a look at Just Ray's record, where they find out that he is criminally associated with Jimmy. They also find out that he got arrested for robbery, but he never goes to jail. So, they head to Just Ray's arresting officer to ask him about it. The arresting officer then shares that Just Ray ratted out Jimmy, so Jimmy gets jailed instead of him. After Jimmy gets freed from jail, Just Ray mysteriously disappears, implying Jimmy takes revenge on Just Ray. Meanwhile, Jimmy and his thug friends arrive at their home, where Dave's wife is waiting outside. She informs Jimmy that she left Dave because of his strange behavior lately. After that, she tearfully shares to him that Dave went home full of blood during the midnight Katie got murdered. Jimmy then asks about Dave's explanation, so Dave's wife shares Dave's story that he killed the mugger, but there is no news about the mugger. Jimmy then seriously asks her if she thinks her husband killed Katie. She affirms. In the headquarters, the detectives interrogate Kid about his father. Kid then reveals that he never talked to his father ever since his father left for a drink and never came back. But Kid and his mother do not believe Just Ray is missing, since he consistently sent them $500 per month. Sean then asks Kid about his father's gun, and informs Kid that his father's gun was used to murder Katie. Kid denies seeing his father have a gun, leaving Sean frustrated. As they get nothing from Kid, Sean listens to the 911 tape, where they figure out that the boy who reported the car knew the victim was actually a girl despite the body being in the park. This implies that the boy might be responsible for Katie's death. Meanwhile, the thug friends pick up Dave along the streets as they ask him to have a drink in the bar. In the bar, they start drinking, and Jimmy soon arrives to drink with them. Night comes, Dave gets tipsy and comes outside in the mystic riverside to vomit. Jimmy and his thug friends follow him. Jimmy shares with Dave the story of Just Ray, his former friend who ratted him out, so he went to jail while his wife was dying from cancer. He then reveals that he killed Just Ray in that exact river and throws the body there. At that moment, Dave figures out that Jimmy thinks he killed Katie, so he nervously tells Jimmy that he killed a man who is molesting a boy, but not Katie. But Jimmy thinks he is lying because of the inconsistent story, and also, there is no body of a child molester found. He promises to let Dave live if he confesses to Katie's murder, so he admits it. As Jimmy asks why, Dave says Katie reminds him of youth that he never had, and says that Jimmy will know what he means if Jimmy enters the abductor's car instead of him during that childhood accident. Jimmy then stabs him and then fatally shoots him. In the meantime, Kid checks his father's gun and finds it missing. He finally figures out that his brother and his friend got their father's gun and killed Katie. Kid thinks that his brother does not want him to leave with Katie. Kid then brutally beats the friend, punching and kicking his face. As Kid proceeds to confront his brother, the friend points their father's gun towards him. Luckily, the detectives arrive at the scene to take control of the commotion. The next day, Jimmy is wasted from drinking along the streets when Sean passes by. Sean informs him that they finally caught the killers, Kid's brother and the friend, who self-confessed earlier. Sean then reveals to Jimmy that the kids are just playing with the gun, and unfortunately, they shot Katie. The kids then kill Katie so she won't tell anyone about their wrongdoings. Jimmy then gets completely shocked upon learning this since he already killed Dave, thinking that Dave is the one who killed his daughter. Suddenly, Sean asks Jimmy about Dave, since the police are looking for Dave after they found the dead body of a child molester behind the bar. This also confirms that Dave is telling the truth. Sean asks him when was the last time he saw Dave. He then says that the last time he saw Dave was in the car when the abductors had taken Dave away. After that, Sean asks him what he did to Dave. In response, Jimmy thanks Sean for finding the killer, but he wishes Sean had solved it a little faster. At this moment, Sean knows that Jimmy must have killed Dave, so he asks Jimmy if he is going to send $500 a month to Dave's family, the same way he did after he killed Kid's father. After that, Sean and Jimmy part ways. Sean suddenly receives a call from his wife. This time, Sean apologizes, and his wife finally speaks and decides to come back to him. The movie ends during the Boston parade, where Sean finally reunites with his family. Dave's wife wanders aimlessly in the parade to find her son, but her son refuses to speak to her since his father is still not coming home. Meanwhile, Jimmy gets comfort from his wife, telling him that he just did what he needs to do as a father. So, they come out to watch the parade, where Jimmy sees Sean on the other side of the street, who then points a gun hand gesture to him, signaling Sean will come after him. In the end, the name of the three are still written on the sidewalk, but Dave's name remains half written. After that, this movie ends here. Thanks for enjoying.